They said it was just a joke. A silly prank. Something I'd get over in a few days. But the truth is, my life ended the second my sister decided my pain was entertainment. I still remember the sound of my own scream, the moment the world spun out of control, and the numbness crawling up my legs like an invisible fire. I begged for help. I begged my parents to believe me when I said I couldn't move. And yet, they laughed. They called me dramatic, attention-seeking, overreacting. Imagine lying helpless on the cold floor while the people who are supposed to love you the most accuse you of faking it. Imagine the betrayal of realizing that your suffering is invisible to the ones you trusted most. Every second of disbelief cut deeper than the pain in my body. I thought I was losing my mind until the MRI results came back. That single scan exposed everything. It revealed the truth I had been screaming into deaf ears. And in that moment, my parents' denial turned into something far darker. Their laughter, their dismissal, their refusal to take me seriously, it wasn't just ignorance anymore. It became criminal, because the MRI didn't just show an injury. It showed what my sister had done. It showed how long they had ignored me, how much damage had been caused by their so-called parenting. And when the doctors confronted them, the look on their faces told me one thing: they knew they were guilty. This is not a story about a prank gone wrong. This is a story about betrayal, cruelty, and the kind of justice that only comes when the truth can no longer be buried. That Sunday started out as one of those ordinary days when nothing feels dangerous, nothing feels like it could go wrong. The sunlight spilled through the curtains in the living room, my parents sat at the kitchen table scrolling through their phones, and my sister, with her usual mischievous grin, was bored. Boredom, in her world, meant trouble for me. She had always liked pushing things too far, harmless pranks that weren't really harmless, jokes that only she laughed at. That afternoon she got it into her head that she wanted to make me fall, literally. I didn't know what she was doing until it was too late. While I sat in my room with my headphones on, she crept upstairs with a roll of clear tape and a bottle of baby oil, carefully stretching the tape across the top step and pouring the slippery liquid just beneath it. To anyone walking down, it looked like nothing was there. It was the perfect trap for someone who trusted the safety of their own home. When I finally left my room to get a snack, I walked toward the stairs completely unaware. My first step onto the tape jolted me, my foot didn't land right, it slipped forward with no grip, and then my other foot slid on the invisible layer of oil. In an instant my body lurched forward, gravity yanked me down, and the world spun. I remember the sound before anything else, the sickening thud of my body hitting step after step, the crack of my head slamming into the wooden railing. The snap of something deep inside me that didn't feel like it would ever heal. My scream tore out of me, raw and uncontrollable, echoing through the house, and then silence except for the ringing in my ears. I was lying at the bottom of the stairs, gasping, paralyzed by pain, and yet what terrified me more was the numbness spreading in my legs. I tried to wiggle my toes, nothing. I tried to pull myself up, but my body wouldn't respond. My chest tightened with panic, and I cried out for help. My sister came running, and for a moment, her wide eyes made me think she understood the seriousness. But then, just like that, her lips curled into a smirk. "Oh my God," she laughed nervously, "you're so dramatic. You should have seen your face." I wanted to scream at her that this wasn't a game, that I couldn't move, but the words tangled with the tears streaming down my face. My parents rushed in moments later, alarm on their faces that quickly melted into irritation when they saw me sprawled on the floor. "What did you do now?" my dad muttered, shaking his head. My mom crouched down, not with concern but with that look she always gave me when she thought I was faking. "Stop it," she said sharply. "Get up. You're scaring everyone." I truly tried, but my legs lay lifeless beneath me. When I cried out again, louder, my dad's face hardened. He grabbed my arm, pulling me up like I was just being lazy, and the piercing scream that ripped from my lungs didn't change his mind. My vision blurred as I was dumped onto the couch, my body trembling uncontrollably, and still they wouldn't believe me. My mom crossed her arms. "You've always been like this," she said coldly. "Always exaggerating everything. My sister stood behind her, biting her lip, pretending to look worried, but her eyes glittered with something between guilt and amusement. I kept whispering, I can't feel my legs, I can't feel my legs, but they ignored me, choosing instead to talk over me as if my pain was nothing more than background noise. Hours passed with me lying there, numbness creeping higher, terror clawing at my chest. I thought maybe they were right, maybe I was dramatic, maybe my brain was playing tricks on me, but the stabbing ache in my spine told me this wasn't imagination. At one point I begged for an ambulance, but my mom snapped back, no, you'll be fine in the morning. Stop making everything an emergency. I stared at her, wondering how a mother could dismiss her child's screams like that. The betrayal burned more than the pain itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, trying to wiggle my toes, trying to convince myself I wasn't broken. My sister tiptoed in once, standing in the doorway, whispering, "Don't tell them it was me," before slipping back into her room. My blood boiled, but I didn't even have the strength to shout. Instead, I lay there in the dark, trapped in my own body, replaying the fall in my mind. I knew something inside me had changed forever, but the people around me refused to see it. And that's when the fear truly sank in, not just fear of the injury, but fear that I was completely alone in it, abandoned in the very house that was supposed to keep me safe. The next morning I woke up on the couch with my body feeling like it was filled with lead, heavy and unresponsive, as if my legs no longer belonged to me. The pain in my back was sharp, radiating every time I shifted even slightly, but worse than the pain was the numbness, it was spreading. My stomach twisted in panic as I tried again to wiggle my toes, to bend my knees, to feel anything, but nothing happened. My hands clutched at the cushions as tears filled my eyes. I called out for my mom, and when she appeared in the doorway, her expression was more annoyance than concern. "Still," she said flatly, like I was complaining about a paper cut. I tried to explain, my voice breaking, that I couldn't move, that it wasn't going away, but she just shook her head and said, "You've got to stop this act. You scared your sister enough yesterday. It's time to get up." My dad came into the room a little later, sipping his coffee like it was just another normal morning, and when I told him again that I couldn't move my legs, he laughed under his breath. "You've always been dramatic," he said, setting his mug down. "You fall a little and suddenly you think you're paralyzed. You just need rest. You'll be fine." His dismissal was like a knife in my chest, twisting deeper with every word. I wanted to scream at them, to make them see the terror in my eyes, but they refused to meet my desperation with anything but disbelief. The day dragged on painfully slow. I was forced to stay on the couch because my parents wouldn't help me to my room, insisting I was capable of getting up myself. Each time I tried, my body betrayed me, and I collapsed back into the cushions, sobbing quietly into the fabric, while my parents carried on with their day as though I didn't exist. At one point, hunger gnawed at my stomach, and I asked my mom if she could bring me food because I physically couldn't get to the kitchen. She stared at me, her arms crossed, and said, "If you're really that hungry, you'll get up yourself. You've been coddled too much already." My sister sat nearby, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing at me with a mixture of guilt and mockery. She whispered, just low enough for our parents not to hear, "You're really milking this, huh?" My throat tightened with anger, but I didn't have the strength to argue. By the afternoon, the pressure of holding my bladder became unbearable. I begged them to help me to the bathroom, but my father, irritated, pulled me up roughly by the arm again, and the searing pain shot through my spine like lightning. I screamed, collapsing back, and he threw up his hands. "Fine, then sit there and cry. If you want to stay like that, it's your choice." His words broke me. I realized then that they truly believed I was faking, that their love for me wasn't strong enough to see the truth written all over my trembling body. That night was worse than the first. The house grew quiet, but in the silence, my mind screamed. I lay awake, fighting the panic that threatened to swallow me whole. I thought of school, of my friends, of all the simple things I used to take for granted, like walking to the fridge or climbing into bed, and I wondered if I would ever do them again. My tears soaked the pillow as I whispered into the darkness, "Please, please let me wake up and walk tomorrow. But deep down, I knew this wasn't something that would disappear overnight. I felt broken in a way that couldn't be undone. Without help, and the terrifying part was that the only people who could help me refused to believe. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. My sister peeked into the living room again, her face pale in the dim light. For once, she didn't smirk. She bit her lip and whispered, "Don't tell them I did it, okay? It was just a joke. I didn't think you'd actually, you know." Her words trailed off, her eyes darting nervously. She wanted reassurance. But I had none to give. I turned away from her, silent, because the anger boiling inside me was too much to contain. She left quickly, the floor creaking under her steps, leaving me alone again. As I lay there, the weight of betrayal pressed down heavier than the numbness in my body. My parents' disbelief was crushing, but my sister's cowardice cut deeper. She had set the trap, and now she wanted to wash her hands clean of it, leaving me to carry the scars. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, exhausted but sleepless, praying for someone, anyone, to see me and believe me. But in that house, belief was a luxury I wasn't going to get. By the third day, my body was no longer just numb, it was failing me in ways that terrified me to my core. My skin had gone pale, I hadn't been able to go to the bathroom properly, and the hunger that once gnawed at me had turned into nausea. Every movement, even the slightest shift on the couch, sent stabbing pain down my spine like fire spreading through dry wood, and still my parents brushed it off. I cried until my throat was raw, whispering again and again that something was seriously wrong, begging them to take me to the hospital, but their faces hardened with the same cold disbelief. My mother snapped that I was trying to drain their money, that I had always been the dramatic one, and my father muttered about how people in his day didn't run to doctors for every little thing. Their words felt like chains, locking me in a prison of helplessness, but my body was screaming louder than their denial. By the evening, I couldn't stop shivering, and my chest felt heavy every time I tried to take a deep breath. Finally, perhaps out of fear that I might actually die in front of them, my mother relented. "Fine," she hissed, grabbing her keys. "But when the doctors say nothing's wrong, don't expect me to apologize." My dad helped drag me to the car, his grip rough on my arms, ignoring my cries of pain as he shoved me into the back seat like I was luggage. My sister climbed in quietly, her face pale, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, but she didn't dare speak. The ride to the hospital was long and unbearable, every bump in the road sent waves of pain crashing through me, and I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. My mother muttered the whole way about wasting money and embarrassing the family, while my father drove in stony silence, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. When we finally arrived, the nurses rushed to me the moment they saw I couldn't stand, their voices urgent, their faces serious in a way my parents never were. They placed me on a stretcher, asking rapid questions about what had happened. And I told them everything, the fall, the pain, the numbness. My parents stood behind them, arms crossed, exchanging exasperated glances as if they were being inconvenienced by my suffering. The doctors wasted no time. They ran a physical exam, asking me to move my legs, to feel touches, but my body betrayed me again and again, lying still no matter how hard I begged it to respond. The doctors' faces darkened, their tones shifting from calm to urgent, and within minutes, they ordered an MRI. As I was wheeled down the cold, sterile hallway, I glanced back and saw my parents finally looking uneasy, though whether it was for me or for themselves, I couldn't tell. The MRI machine swallowed me whole, the loud thumping sounds echoing in my ears as I lay perfectly still, my mind racing with fear. When it was over and they wheeled me back, I saw the doctor holding the scans, his expression grave. He walked into the room where my parents waited, and his words cut through the air like a blade. "Your child has a spinal cord injury. This is not minor. This has been worsening over the past 3 days, and every hour of delay has caused more damage." My mother blinked, her face paling, while my father stiffened in his chair. The doctor turned to me gently, his voice softer. "You should have been brought here immediately after the fall." My throat closed up as tears streamed down my face, not just from the confirmation of my greatest fear, but from the validation I had been begging for. Finally, someone believed me. But the relief was drowned out quickly by rage as I saw my parents' faces. My mother's lips trembled, but instead of apologizing, she looked down, ashamed of being caught rather than ashamed of what she had done. My father clenched his jaw, his silence saying everything. The doctor asked how the fall happened, and I told him every detail about the prank, the tape, the oil, the fall down the stairs. My sister's face drained of all color, and she stammered. It was an accident, I didn't think, but the doctor cut her off sharply. This was no accident. This was dangerous and reckless, and the consequences are life-altering. He ordered more staff into the room, scribbling notes, and I overheard him mention mandatory reporting. That phrase sent a visible shiver through my parents. They knew exactly what it meant. The look they exchanged wasn't one of concern for me but of fear for themselves. For the first time, I saw them not as my parents but as people exposed for what they had done, people who chose denial over love, who let me suffer until my body broke further. My heart ached, but there was also a strange sense of justice flickering inside me. The MRI had spoken the truth they tried so hard to silence. And now they could no longer call me dramatic. They could no longer ignore me. The world now knew what they had done. The air in the hospital room grew heavier the moment the doctor mentioned mandatory reporting, as if the walls themselves understood the gravity of what was happening better than my parents ever had. My mother's face turned ghostly pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was scrambling for excuses, while my father sat rigid in his chair, his fists clenched against his knees, silent but seething. My sister sat in the corner, her phone forgotten in her lap, her eyes darting nervously between all of us, guilt painted across her face though she tried to hide it. The doctor's tone grew sharper as he explained that neglecting an injury of this severity wasn't just careless, it was dangerous, and could have caused permanent, irreversible damage. He looked directly at my parents when he said, 3 days of delay has worsened this child's condition, and that is neglect. We are required by law to report this. My chest tightened as I listened, my heart thundering in a mix of vindication and dread. For so long, I had begged them to believe me, to listen, to care, and now the truth was out, but instead of remorse, what I saw in their eyes was fear of consequences. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. She's always been dramatic. We thought, but the doctor cut her off, his voice steely. You thought wrong, and she has paid the price. My father finally exploded, his voice booming through the room. This is ridiculous. We didn't abuse her. We didn't beat her. You can't treat us like criminals for a simple mistake. The doctor didn't flinch. Neglect is abuse. Letting her suffer, dismissing her cries, and refusing to seek medical care, it is criminal. His words hit the room like a hammer. And for once, my father had nothing to say. A social worker entered not long after, holding a clipboard, her eyes kind but serious. She came to my bedside, gently brushing my hair back from my face, and asked me to tell her what happened in my own words. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, recounting the prank, the fall, the pain, and the days of being ignored. Each detail spilled from me like poison I had held inside for too long, and by the time I finished, tears blurred my vision. The social worker nodded, scribbling everything down, and when I looked up, I saw my parents shifting uncomfortably, realizing that their version of events no longer mattered. My sister, trembling now, whispered, I didn't mean it. I didn't think it would, but the social worker raised her hand. Intentions don't erase consequences. Your actions. Put your sibling in the hospital. My sister's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she looked truly broken, but it was too late. The damage was done. My parents began pleading, their voices overlapping, insisting they thought I was fine, that I had exaggerated, that they were trying to teach me not to be overdramatic. The social worker's eyes hardened. Children don't fake paralysis. The fact that you chose disbelief over action is negligence. She stepped out briefly, and when she returned, 2 police officers followed behind her. The sight of the uniforms made my mother gasp, and my father stood up abruptly, his voice shaking with anger. This isn't necessary. We're her parents. One of the officers looked him square in the eye and said, and that's exactly why this is necessary. Parents are supposed to protect their children, not dismiss their cries for help. My parents fell silent then, the fight draining from their faces, replaced by dread. They were questioned, every detail dissected, while I lay there listening, the reality of what was happening sinking deeper into my bones. For the first time, power had shifted. For the first time, it wasn't their word against mine. It was truth against lies, and the truth was finally louder. My mother began crying, sobbing about how she just didn't know, while my father stared at the floor, his jaw tight, his silence damning him more than any words could. My sister sat frozen, tears running down her face, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over, but her apologies were nothing more than echoes in the storm. The officers didn't arrest anyone immediately, but they made it clear the investigation was ongoing. They would be reviewing the reports, the MRI scans, and my testimony. As they left, the social worker stayed behind, her presence both comforting and heavy. She told me softly that I wasn't alone anymore, that I was safe, and that the system would make sure this didn't get buried. I clung to her words like a lifeline, though part of me still ached for something I would never get, my parents' genuine love and belief. As the night settled in, the reality of what had just happened pressed against me like a weight I couldn't shake. My parents weren't just my parents anymore, they were people under suspicion of a crime, people who had let their own child suffer to protect their pride. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, and whispered to myself that maybe, just maybe, justice was finally starting to catch up with them. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm that wouldn't end, only now I was no longer screaming into silence, people were finally listening. The hospital became my world, a place where every beep of the monitors and every soft step of the nurses reminded me that I was fragile but alive. Doctors explained that my injury would take months, maybe years, of therapy, and even then, there was no guarantee I would walk the way I used to again. The words hit me like a tidal wave, but beneath the fear was a strange sense of relief, at least I had answers, at least I knew it wasn't in my head. My parents, however, could no longer hide behind disbelief. Social workers visited daily. Their questions sharp, their notes detailed, and each time my parents tried to twist the story, I corrected them with the truth. My sister sat by quietly most of the time, wringing her hands, the weight of her guilt etched into every twitch of her face. One night, when my parents weren't around, she whispered through tears, "I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to laugh, I didn't know it would ruin everything." I stared at her, searching her eyes for the sister I used to love, but all I saw was a stranger who had traded my safety for her amusement. I told her softly, "You didn't just ruin everything. You ruined me." She sobbed, but I turned away, unable to give her the forgiveness she wanted, because my body reminded me every second of what her joke had cost me. The investigation moved quickly. The police interviewed me formally, recording every detail of how my cries were ignored, how my pain was dismissed, how I was left to rot on the couch for days while my parents mocked me. The MRI results became evidence, undeniable proof that their neglect wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime. The word criminal neglect came up more than once, and I watched my parents' faces twist with shame and anger, not at what they had done, but at being held accountable. They tried to argue that they were protecting me from unnecessary panic, but the doctors, the social workers, and the police all saw through it. Slowly, the walls closed in on them. My father grew quieter. With each visit, retreating into silence, while my mother became more frantic, begging anyone who would listen to believe she was just misguided. But the truth was clear, they had chosen disbelief over love, pride over protection, and now they would face the consequences. When the charges were officially filed, the weight of it crashed down on all of us. My parents weren't dragged away in handcuffs, but they were stripped of the image they had built of the responsible, caring parents they wanted the world to believe they were. To the law, they were neglectful, reckless, criminal. To me, they were something worse, strangers who had chosen to let their own child suffer. My sister was given mandatory counseling and community service, her age sparing her from harsher punishment, but I knew her sentence would never match what she had done to me. As for me, my battle was only beginning. The physical therapy sessions were grueling, hours of sweat and tears as I tried to coax life back into my legs, every inch of progress paid for with pain. Some days I wanted to give up, to sink into the despair that whispered I would never be whole again. But then I remembered lying on that couch, begging to be heard, and I realized that surviving had already made me stronger than I ever thought possible. The hospital staff became my family during those long weeks, nurses who cheered when I managed the smallest movements, therapists who pushed me when I wanted to quit, doctors who reminded me that recovery was a journey, not a race. For the first time in a long time, I felt cared for, truly cared for, and it reminded me that not everyone in the world would choose disbelief over compassion. When I was finally discharged, my future was uncertain. I returned home, but it no longer felt like home. The walls carried echoes of betrayal, every corner a reminder of the days I cried out and was ignored. My parents tiptoed around me, trying to act as though nothing had happened, but I saw the fear in their eyes, the knowledge that they could no longer hide from what they had done. I kept my distance, my heart hardened, no longer craving the love I once begged for. They had lost the right to call themselves my protectors. As the weeks passed, I began to find strength in my own survival. The scars on my body were permanent, but so was the fire in my spirit. I learned to move forward with the knowledge that I had endured the unendurable, that I had been dismissed, betrayed, and broken, and yet I had risen from it with a voice too loud to be silenced. My story became my weapon, the truth they had tried to bury, now the light that exposed them for what they were. And as I looked ahead, uncertain of whether my legs would ever carry me the same way again, I made myself a promise: I would never again let anyone call me dramatic for speaking my pain. My voice had saved me, my truth had condemned them, and in the end, the MRI didn't just reveal my injury, it revealed the criminals who called themselves my family. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to The Silent Revenge for more powerful stories you can't miss.